Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna talk about a very interesting contemporary British writer. Her name is Zadie Smith, and I will specifically talk about her novel White Teeth. Uh, I spent for this book such a long period. Like I took it from library, I think, in December and finished it, I think, in May. Because I don't think the language of this book is very, very simple comparing to other books you can take, and a lot of British humor, a lot of different British kind of slang, and not that easy to read and not that easy to focus. But I still think the book is very, very nice, very funny, and worth to read, definitely. So this writer is her name, as I said, is Zadie Smith, and she is supposedly living in London right now. She was born in London. However, her mom is from Jamaica, and her dad is, as I understood, from Britain. I tried to find more information about her biography, but it was not that easy, and not a lot of materials about her mom's, for example, experience in living in Jamaica, how she moved to. Maybe I was not that lucky, or maybe I was not that hardworking to find these materials, but didn't stumble upon something really very descriptive on this topic, right? But I found a very interesting article by Jeffrey Eugenides, who was or who is a friend of Zadie Smith, and he wrote an article about her, and where I found mainly two interesting things about her. So these things are actually, I would say that Zadie Smith is like ugly duckling. She thought of herself in this way, and also her biracial issues. So first of all, what she writes about herself is that I've always felt very cringy about myself. Fiction is a useful way of getting around it, or disguising oneself one way or another. Not being able to write in the first person was very much about that, and self disgust or anxiety about saying I. So actually, she writes it because Jeffrey Eugenides asked her, probably he asked her that, why all your novels you write from the third person, and like many other writers, when they write a story they write from first person, like that's how they create their character. But that is Smith, if we take this White Teeth novel, so you can see that there are plenty of characters, but they all describe from the third person. So I guess trying to answer his question about why is that third person, she actually gives a context of the reason maybe why she started to write, because like some writers, they actually do it because they feel some kind of anxiety of disgust to themselves, and they want to get away from this feeling, they want to kind of forget about themselves, and that's why they started creating stories. I think that's a very probable reason, maybe, for some writers to do it. So I think when I was a teenager, I tried to write my stories exactly because of this reason, because I didn't want to. I wanted to forget about myself, about problems, and that's why you kind of try to create your own world. And as he himself describes her, she was a very approachable, immensely um, like Zadie Smith, as Jeffrey Eugenides describes her. She was a very approachable person, and she has a very welcoming air around her. And any person who somehow communicated with her uh, would it be a reader, a fellow, a writer, a doorman, everyone she meets. So she actually approaches you with your Nefertiti face, as he writes, but once she makes a joke or laughs or anything, there is something very charming, very magical about her, that you feel very warm around her. So even though she has this status of a former ugly duckling, nowadays everyone can feel that she's very female. Uh, she is very warm, and it's very pleasant to communicate with her. That's how he describes her. And concerning her racial, her racial, let's say, status, or because her mom was Jamaican, and but she grew up in London, she had friends in London, and I think she thinks of herself as a British British origin, right? So, but as she said, once she went to visit her mom in Jamaica or something, and she actually tried to, like, um, alienate from that Jamaica, from that country. She tried not to think of herself as someone who may have originated from that country. It's very funny how she writes. I believe my mother had a boyfriend there. I didn't realize that until we got there. I just wanted to be in London with my friends. I was allergic to everything. I was too hot, I was too sunburned. I didn't want to belong to the place. So I didn't want to belong to that place. Yeah, it's very funny how she describes it. But anyway, she still describes this kind of experience in her books, particularly in our Whitey's novel, right? Okay, so now talking more about her literature background, I also found a very interesting article by David Marcus, which is called like Post Hysterics, that is Myth and the Fiction of Austerity. And right in the opening of this article, David Marcus, he says that 90s in literature, because a novel was published in 2000, and he says that 90s in literature was like, even not, we are not talking about only literature, right? In society, it was a time of big changes. Like, as we know, Soviet Union collapsed. There was a war in Yugoslavia, and in the Western countries, people could afford a little bit more than they could afford before this time of stagnation finished, and economically, financially, people had more abilities to purchase stuff, to enjoy life a little bit more. And So, following the social economic changes, literature also had some changes, and if the older generation of writers, like let's say, I don't know, Philip Ross, John Cousy, Toni Morrison, they dig deeper into history. They try to recreate history, um, and create some kind of very big. How to say, monumental novel, right? The present writers, they also wanted to create some kind of monumental novel, but they didn't want to write so much about history and so much about the past. Instead they wanted to focus on the present. And that is Mies, actually. I think she focuses on the present, although all her characters have kind of roots, have these historical roots. And as David Marcus writes, he says, like, we all suffer alone in the real world. True empathy is impossible, but the place of fiction can allow us imaginatively to identify with characters' pain. This is nourishing, redemptive. This is why one writes and reads, to become less alone inside. So actually, yeah, if we take Zadie Smith White teeth, it's actually a story of a very local community of people and how they interact. And what's very important is that it's the interaction of not monogamous kind of society, because this society that is described is consists of different people of different backgrounds, traditions, nationalities, religion, and I think this is very interesting because uh, speaking from my point of view, from my experience, 90s in Ukraine was a time when, as I said, Soviet Union collapsed and people could actually, the borders were open and people actually could see something outside of Soviet Union. And the first kind of wave of immigration in Ukraine was in 90s. A lot of people tried to move to Western, more developed countries. And I think that's the modern day concern of many Western countries, whether to allow people to come, stay, to immigrate, or whether close borders and be more strict about who can actually come, right? And because this kind of new type of society is a big problem. People who come to Western countries, they have their own backgrounds, and the most interesting things is how they interact with people who live there for many generations, let's say. Okay, so I think it's very important topic in literature, in modern literature. And why I like particularly this novel is because of many reasons. Like, first of all, the design of the novel is very interesting, the structure. So the novel takes place in a working class suburb of Willesden in northwest London. I don't know where it is. I never been to London or in England. So and it chronicles the lives of two best friends, who is Archibald Jones, a down on his luck Englishman whose failed suicide attempt opens the novel, and his friend Samet Iqbal, a Bengali Muslim who struggles to fit into British society. And the structure of the novel is very interesting because from one point of view it's a very classical family novel which describes the life of two families and different generations of these people. So actually, I think in world literature there are many examples of family novels. In Ukrainian literature, there are actually also many examples of these family novels. But also, I think the story have has this kind of narration joints. First of one of the joints of this novel is a mystery of Archibald's murder during the World War II, when he supposedly kills some French crazy scientist, but in the end it reveals that he didn't kill him and he actually saved his life two times. So I think this is a very interesting kind of the way how she structures her story. Besides that, there is a central image in the story Tees, which appears in different places, and I personally don't understand this image so well. I have some theories, but I would really like to know what do they think about why the novel is called White Teeth, and what is this image about, or it's not about only one thing, many things at the same time. Okay, and that's what the first reason why I like it. The second reason is because of the topics in this novel. I like that she tries to mock religion, although usually I don't like this very much. This, postmodern way of mocking religion and stuff. I think it's a bit boring. But in this novel, I like it very much, and she actually describes this kind of thing that religion is an escape mechanism for many people because they feel alienation and they want to escape from from it, and that's why become they just got trapped into this religion way of thinking, or joining some kind of religion community, which substitutes this feeling of alienation in the society, but it really doesn't help you anyhow, I think. And I also like this thing that it's not only about immigrants, it's also about how white people struggle in this kind of society, how post-war white veterans they struggle in the society and try to find their place in the modern world, right? Also, I like that she describes generation of immigrants and their histories, and she actually models like she models a lot of different paths of people, how they actually try to find their ways to adapt in the new society. And I also came across a very interesting article of Serkan Baglama, or Baglama, I don't know. It's called Zadie Smith White Teeth, the interpolation of the colonial subject in multicultural Britain. Oh my god, really high academic article. Okay, so he talks about this. He has this concept of double alienation and Marx's theory of alienation. So he actually, what does he do? He takes a Marx theory of alienation that based on a concept of natural man and species man. So what is it about? Natural man is like, like someone who has natural needs, like eat, sleep, have sex. And so there are two kinds of people in the society, right? One is the natural man and another one is the spacious man. Spacious man is a man who it's all about one person, I suppose, because we all have this side that we have to satisfy our natural needs, right? And another side in a human being in that he needs to create some product. So naturally we have this necessity to create products in order to see ourselves in this product and in order to have some sense of living, right? And he says that whenever a person is trying to create in some kind of free, spontaneous way some product of a nature, this is called the process of object objectification of labor. I'm sorry. So the object of labor is the objectification of man's species life for the duplicates himself not only intellectually but also actively, and therefore he sees himself in a world that he has created. So we need this kind of thing of creating something, creating a product in order to find ourselves in this world. I think that's the main idea of this article. And so because we cannot actually, if we have no opportunity to express ourselves, that will cause alienation in the society, because we no longer understand why we exist and we just chaotically look for some meaning in our life, but we cannot find it. And that's why we have this character Samad Iqbal, who appears to be in a new society with his background and history, and he thought of himself as a war hero, as a someone who also comes from a family of heroes. And it turns out he's just a waiter, and he always denies this kind of that he's a waiter. I think he doesn't want to do it, but because he need to feed his family and start his life over again, so he has to be a waiter. That's the only job for him, and he's not happy. He feels alienated. He feels that he cannot match into that society with all his ambitions, and That's why he goes hard into religion and has all that very erroneous ideas in his mind. And so, despite of the celebration of creativity, freedom, and multiculturalism, the immigrant characters struggle to nullify the unpleasantness of double alienation and nothingness in the zone of non-being through some similar illusory outward and inward escape mechanism. So people have inward and outward escape mechanism. For white people, for example, as Zadie Smith, you also can see it in her novel, this kind of inward escape mechanism will be having some casual sex, drinking a lot, shopping, sport games, smoking cannabis, or finding peace in commodities, living beyond their means, like as I said. So, but this is for white people. For other people, black working class, let's say, they have to justify their political existence in the mainstream white society, and they have to approve that they are visible, that they are self-worth and self-present, let's say. And that's why it creates a lot of problems, for a person. So let's talk about three main characters, which are very, very interesting, which is Samad Iqbal and their two sons. He has Majid and Milad. Samad Iqbal, as I said, he thinks of himself as a war hero, and he's very religious, very traditionalist, and as I like, as Zadie Smith says, having history, this concept of having history. So basically, he's just a guy who thinks, as I said, of himself as a war hero, and he thinks that he's a descendant of Mangal Pandey, who provoked, like many years ago, he provoked a mutiny in India against British invasion, and he was hanged because of that reason. He was killed, and but he's considered a hero, and Samad thinks that he is the descendant of this hero, and he also is a hero because of that, and that's why he also has to follow the path of good Muslims, show a way for his sons. However, like this creates the humorous situation right here, because he always like repeats to himself that he has to be a good Muslim, he has to be a good father, he has to show a way to his sons how to behave and everything. But he has a lot of temptations that he cannot resist. Like one of these temptations is that he finds a woman in the school of his kids who is a teacher, and that teacher, she likes him because he is like exotic, and she's reading a lot of stuff about India, about Indian culture, and she's so excited, and that's why she wants to be with him, to have sex, and also listen to his cultural things. But he's not willing to do it. For him, she is a temptation, and he struggles with her because he wants to have sex with this woman, and he has it, but he, like like a guilty pleasure after the process, he is feeling like, oh my god, he like betrayed Allah again, like Muhammad and everything. And this creates some kind of very funny humorous situation, that he he's trying to be a good Muslim, but really fails every step, and how she describes it, like very, very super cool, super interesting to read it. So yeah, and what's more interesting that we see the how white people in Britain, they think of this Muslim people, right? That they are exotic, they have some interesting culture, but it's completely different on the Muslim side, right? On this Samad Iqbal side. Okay, and this creates even more interesting situation because Majid, which is a son of Samad Iqbal, one day he sees his father's affair, and because he sees that affair, Samad Iqbal is actually at the process of thinking which son to choose to send him to India so he could become a more proper Muslim. And he's thinking between Majid and Milad because they don't have enough money to send both sons. So he's thinking who should I pick? And first he thinks maybe Majid because Majid is my first son. He's my favorite. He is gonna be a very smart boy and a very proper Muslim. So maybe him. But then he thinks no, I should send Milad because Milad is not so good and like he's not so smart and he will definitely have problems in future. So maybe I should send Milad because um, it will show him a right path in future. And so he finally picks up Majid because Majid, I think, he sees his dad affair, and not to get revealed for his wife Alsana, Samad sends him to India, and it's just so tragic because he also does it without letting his wife know, and it's very painful. So and Majid, so this Majid and Milad, they are twins, and basically they are like one person, right? And it's so interesting because two identical people, let's say, they are growing in different societies, and what do they become finally? So Majid becomes even more British than he is. A boy who grows up in India, every day he just dreams to come back and become like a scientist. And as Zadie Smith writes herself, he he tries to mimic the British people as much as he can. He brushing his teeth 6 times a day, ironing his underwear, eating his breakfast. And he speaks. The most interesting how she writes dialogues with him because he speaks really a very very eloquent Queen's English. This is very funny how she writes, how she creates this character. And so he is actually even more English than English people are. And what about Milad then? Milad he is, this kind of teenagers who just have this aggression against everything, this kind of uncontrolled energy. And the best way for these kids, I think, is to direct their energy somewhere. But because Milad, his parents don't care about him a lot, and he doesn't know where to apply this energy, right? So it happens that he just joins some militant group, keepers of the eternal and victorious Islamic nation, Kevin. So he becomes the one of these members of this society, of this community. And but he even cannot properly pray. He doesn't know how to pray properly, but he becomes this defendant of Islamic nation, and becomes just more xenophobic and more marginalized, and even more angry, and decides to kill the scientist in the end, right? Just because he doesn't really understand what he does, why is it going that way. Like he cannot reflect it intellectually. He's just like very emotional, like this kind of energy, in him, and he doesn't know how to apply it. He cannot find a way to demonstrate it in a correct way in the society. Yeah, so that's what's going on with him. uh, so I think this tripod Samad Iqbal, Majid, and Milad are most interesting things that in this novel. But I also like Hortense, Clara, and Irie Jones. So Hortense was immigrant from Jamaica. I think actually her ancestor immigrated from Jamaica and got some intercourse with a British man, and then Hortense is her daughter. Like I was talking about Ambrosia, which is the mom of Hortense, and Hortense. She also like a first generation of immigrants, the daughter of the immigrant, and it happened that she heard the Lord's voice. Yeah, she heard the Lord's voice and become of witnesses of Genoa, and so she forces her daughter Clara to go from flat to flat, because this witness of Genoa is kind of also some kind of you know just religious group, right? Non-official religious group. And so she forces her daughter Clara to go from flat to flat and give people the leaflets to try to convert them into this church. They also believe that the world end will come soon, and that's why they have to have a very proper Christian life, right? And so that's how Clara meets first of her boyfriends, and it's very interesting how it all happens. I want to read it a little bit. So she meets Ryan because these young people, they meet each other somewhere around her flat, and they feel that they are sexually like attractive to each other, right? And how she writes about these relationships. Uh, the very afternoon, there were furtive fumblings on Ryan's couch, which went a good deal further than one might expect of a Christian girl. And the devil won another easy hand in God's poker game. It's very funny. Then it happens that way, that somehow magically this kind of Ryan, he I think they survived some kind of car accident. He had a scooter, and they fall down from the scooter, and Ryan, he had some stuff with his head, something happened to his head. So from a normal teenage guy, he suddenly turns into a follower of these Genoa witnesses, and he becomes a little bit crazy and very deep into religion. And because Clara, she wanted so much to escape her mother's boring, trying to convert her to this religion, she just wanted to have a normal teenage life, and she found Ryan as her escape. But Ryan, after the accident, converted suddenly into this follower. She felt so pity, and like Zadie Smith's writes, so he was trying to escape. Ryan tried to escape Clara, avoid her, and but actually later that month, when Clara persuaded doleful Ryan to go through the motions with her in the disabled toilet, she squinted so she couldn't see what she didn't want to see, but it was there underneath his jumper. There, as he leaned back on the sink, was the glint of silver, its gleam hardly visible in the dismal light. It could be, but it was, the silver glint of a tiny silver cross. So she actually pulls him in the toilet, and she has this hope that maybe he will not have he's not crazy. He will come back, and they have a normal life of teenagers who have like sex somewhere and just have fun, and she puts him in the toilet to check, and she finds this silver cross, and she got even more disappointed. And at that moment, I think she was so disappointed. She just wanted to escape all that environment, and that's why it's so easily she finds Archie and just got married, and without even thinking too much, without like thinking that maybe he is not a proper man for her, but she just want to escape her mother. Yeah, and it's very interesting how she describes everything, and for example, when she creates her characters all have some small weird things, as she describes Alsana, for example, the wife of Samad Iqbal. At the corner of the road, Alsana popped behind the post office and removed her pinchy sandals in favor of Samad's shoes. It wasn't ordinary about Alsana. She was small, but her feet were enormous. You felt instinctively, when looking at her, that she had yet more growing to do. In second, she whipped her hair into an efficient bun and wrapped her coat tighter around her to keep out the wind. Then she set off up past the library and up a long green road, and had never walked alone before. Survival is all, little Iqbal, she said to her bump once more. Survival. Yeah. So this is, I think, one of the first scenes we meet Alsana, and we already know what special thing is about her appearance and what she has on her mind, because for Alsana, like the escape from India was very important, because she only sees it as the country of disasters, the country of war, like this kind of things. In contrast to Samad, because he sends his son there because he thinks he will become a proper Muslim. Okay, what else did I want to read? So actually, as I said, this novel is about two families, but I think this novel is actually about the three families. The third family is the family of Chalfants, which is like a proper British family of white people. So, and they have this weird thing that they name, like they have their own concepts, like they always say, like, we do it in a Chalfant's way. It means like something the way they do. I don't know, something like that. And so this family Chalfant, because Archibald's family and Samad's family, they fail to to grow their kids in the correct way. So Chalfants, they take care of Irie and Millet in some way, and that's how Joyce, that's the Chalfant's wife, she takes Irie, and she looks, the first time they meet Millet and Irie, Joyce paused and looked at Irie and Millet the way she had looked at her garter knight Delphinium. She was a quick and experienced detector of illness, and there was damage here. There was a quieter pain in the first one, which is Irie, Irisus nigressium marcusilia, a lack of a father feature perhaps, or an intellect untapped, a low self-esteem, and in a second, Milaturea brandolidia joyculatus, it's about Millet. There was a deeper sadness, a terrible loss, a gaping wound, a hole that needed more than education or money, that needed love. Joyce longed to touch the side with the tip of her Chalfen green finger, close the gap, knit the skin. Okay, so actually, this quote actually tells you that if we take the first generation, like Samad and Archie, they fail to upbring their kids in a proper way, because they are themselves, they are trapped into some into some thinking. They are alienated themselves, and they are very, I think, self-focused on their own problems, on their own illusions, and they cannot provide their kids a proper communication between a parent and a kid, because like there are a couple of moments like Samad, he just destroys all the posters of his son, and they have a huge scandal in their yard, and which makes Milat leave the house. And for Irie, when she just notices the family tree of Chalfans, and she wants to know more about her own roots, and she comes back home and asks, she actually receives some kind of denial from her parents that they are not willing to tell anything about like their family, about their roots, about her ancestors. And so we clearly see that there is like a communication problem between generation, and because of that, the second generation, the kids of the immigrants, they also feel some kind of alienation in the society. And here comes some some family, British families that gonna take care of these kids, and but just again following their own interest in this. And because these Chow fans, they have their son, I think Joshua or Marcus, or don't remember exactly the name, and they don't really care about their kids. They just want to show that they are good citizens and everything. And like that's why they take care of Milet and Irie. Although even Joyce, I don't really understand her feelings to Milet, because it's like not normal feelings, I think. Okay, the last thing I want to read today is actually this. So she actually writes about immigrants. Whatever road presents itself, they will take, she says about Milat and Majid. And if it happens to lead to a dead end, well then, Mr. Schmuters and Mr. Banaji will merrily set upon another, waving their way through happy multicultural land. Well, good for them, but Majid and Milat couldn't manage it. They left that neutral room as they had entered it, weighted down, burdened, unable to waver from their course or in any way change their separate dangerous trajectories. They seem to make no progress. The cynical might say they don't even move at all, that Majid and Milat are two of Zeno's Hadfok arrows, occupying a space equal to themselves, and what is scarier, equal to Mangal Pandis, equal to Samad Iqbal. Two brothers trapped in a temporal instant. Two brothers who pervert all attempts to put dates to this story, to track these guys, to offer times and days, because there isn't, wasn't, and never will be any duration. In fact, nothing moves, nothing changes. They are running at a standstill. Zeno's paradox. But what was the Zeno's deal here? Everybody got a deal. What was his angle? There is a body of opinion that argues his paradoxes are part of a more general spiritual program. The first established multiplicity, the many, as an illusion, and thus prove reality as seamless following whole, a single invisible one. Because if you can divide reality inexhaustibly into parts, as the brothers did that day in the room, the result is unsupportable paradox. You are always still, you move nowhere, there is no progress. But multiplicity is no illusion, nor is the speed with which those in the simmering melting pot are dashing towards it. Paradoxes aside, they are running just as Achilles was running, and they will lapse those who are in denial just as surely as Achilles would have made that tortoise eat his dust. Yeah, Zeno had an angle. He wanted the one, but the world is many, and yet still that paradox is alluring. The harder Achilles tries to catch the tortoise, the more eloquently the tortoise expresses its advantage. Likewise, the brothers will race towards the future only to find they more and more eloquently express their past, the place where they have just been. Because this is the other thing about immigrants, Fugees, emigrants, travelers. They cannot escape their history, and more than you yourself can lose your shadow. I think from this passage, it's two important ideas. First of all, is that we all have like we may have conflicts in the society, right? Like Majid and Milad are like very different people, and although they are identical, they are twins, right? They just got into different environments, different circumstances, and grew up with different kind of thinking and mentality, right? But despite us having some conflicts and different thinking, we cannot move if we are not united, if we cannot compromise between each other, I think. And we have to find a way how to move forward. The second very interesting thinking is that, as young people, when I was 20 years old, I thought like I'm very ambitious, and I have this idea that I will become something more than my parents, and I will become like maybe more successful than them or something, and I will have a broader thinking. But as time goes, I just realized that um maybe there is some unconscious thing that I cannot actually realize, and because I have a background and now I am a different environment, I am living in a different culture, let's say, and I still kind of retranslate my own culture here, even if I don't want, even if I do it, I'm like, I don't control it, I do it unconsciously, but I still may do it. I still may have my history, my past, the past of my ancestors, and maybe I'm purely acting because of my ancestors, because there is some kind of pattern that my family has, right? And it's very interesting how we think of ourselves as a conscious people, but maybe we're just acting because we have some patterns of our families, of our ancestors. It's a very interesting thing, I think, that like in this novel, right? Majid and Milad, they think they are very different from their parents, but actually, like Milad, he's just doing the same as his dad, and he even not realizing it, because the same as Samad is crazy about religion, about being a proper Muslim. The same way Milad is joining some kind of religious militant group to and have these illusions in his head, right? Like maybe my own history as a Ukrainian, and I do act like Ukrainian, although I don't realize it that much. This is a very interesting topic. I think I will be really grateful if you let me know what you think about it, about the novel in general, about if you're an immigrant in another country or expat, you know, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for today. Read the novel. I hope you can read it faster than me, and you will not struggle with British slang that much. So see you next time. Bye bye.